If you've ever been in the market for a keyboard, whether that's for bedroom production, for kind of home usage and just learning piano, up into, professional studio live use, everyone will have seen an array of different keyboards, from MIDI controllers that are like £100 to your basic stage pianos, basic digital pianos, all the way through to your stage pianos and Workstation. And there will also be a million and one people online arguing about which one is the best within every single category. But the real question is, which one isn't which one is better. It's actually, what are you paying for, and does it matter to you as a musician? Rather than it being, being really opinionated in this video, not that I'm ever like that, but one of the things I always try and do in my videos is to just be completely real, completely honest, and give you the facts, as well as my opinions, but it's based from a lot of experience. And yeah, let's get stuck in. So why does it actually matter? Well, if you look at the price of an average stage piano now, like a professional one, you're looking anywhere from £2,000 for your Yamahas, all the way up to £4,000 for your lovely Nords. And I think there's an enormous amount of pressure to make sure that if I'm going to part with my hard-earned cash, which one do I go for? And the way that these keyboard manufacturers are, and the way they market things, the lines between all of the different products are very blurry. Nord, for example, have very Apple-like a ladder of products where you can say to yourself you'll need a Nord Electro, and then you'll end up walking away with a Nord Stage 4 and a further £1,800 of your money, or whatever your local currency is. If we're being completely real, a lot of these keyboards can cost as much of a car, or as a car rather, and the one thing that you need to do is make sure that you're buying something with 100% knowledge of this is definitely the right thing for the job, rather than the hype. I say this as someone who is lucky enough to I've currently got a Nord Stage 3 in front of me, and a lovely Korg Kronos, which we'll look at doing a bit of a deep dive and a kind of comparison. But do not mistake the fact that it's took me an incredibly long time to get this equipment. It's not like I've just bought it on a whim. And as part of my process in understanding my own value for money, the types of things I've kind of had to research and go through, hopefully I can share with you. So the big argument really, and this is probably going to get me a little bit of hate, but quite frankly, one person walks away from this a little bit more well-informed, and I get someone who's not so pleased about me slagging off their favourite product. That's completely fine. But at what point is the hype about certain instruments on a status versus actually something that's really giving you value as a musician and an artist? Whether you're gigging, bedroom, doesn't really matter. And I think the biggest one that I look at is, and it's a perfect example because I've got them both here, which I'll go through in a moment, but Workstation versus stage piano. For a top tier stage piano at the moment, you are looking at, as we've said, £2,000-3,000. Basic example. Let's take a Yamaha YC 88 or a CP 88, or you've got obviously your Nord Stages. There's millions of products. I'm not going to shout them all out because honestly I'd be here all day. Those are dedicated stage pianos. If you've not seen what the difference is between all the types of keyboards and such, please watch my other video where I kind of go through in a little bit more detail. But to summarise, you've got all these different categories of keyboards that are marketed in such a way. And I think when you peel back all the marketing nonsense for what it is, you actually go, okay, what does my £2,000, £3,000, whatever it is I'm spending, actually get me? And I think the first question you need to ask yourself as a buyer and as a consumer, what do I actually need? Be completely real and honest with yourself, because I think this is the first trap of workstations and stage pianos. Actually, they both can do the exact same thing. but it depends very much on you as a user. So, for example, let me get stuck straight in here. So if I just jump straight down, I've got the Nord Stage 3 here. You'll have to forgive the camera angles, but that's just limitations of my setup. And I've got the Kronos 3 underneath. I'll show you some B-roll and stuff under that as well. And just as an example, so I've got the Nord Stage 3, just not playing any sound at the moment. One sec. There you go. Turn some of them effects off. Lovely sound, and I will start by saying I think the Nord samples are the best you can get. Full stop. Are they so good that it's worth paying another 1,000 or something pounds for, as opposed to, say, Yamaha or a Roland or whatever? The answer is a flat out no. Straight up. I'm not even going to try and do a comparison for it. There's loads of videos that compare the different piano tones. It's the way to describe it, just to kind of very quickly go on a little bit of a tangent, is guitars come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Fundamentally, what makes an electric guitar work is pickups and then loads of electronics. You hit some strings, you interrupt a magnetic field, it gets captured, blah, blah, blah. Guitars, much like pianos, go from anywhere between £200, like Harley Benton's from Thomann, absolutely fantastic, by the way. Definitely look them up if you're interested. Versus then your luxury Gibsons, PRS, Fenders. And fundamentally, if you actually broke them down into the components and what you're getting for your money, the difference between a £200 Chinese-made guitar versus a £5,000, custom Gibson, they are very different, but they're not. It's not a scale that's like a 1-to-1 ratio, if that makes sense. So, for example, with Ibanez, you've got a midline kind of series, which is the premium range. They are 90% of the way to being a prestige guitar. Prestige being the top of the line models. Very similar with Fender and the Player series versus the Custom series. You're talking £600 for a lovely playable telly that, to be honest, is fantastic. And if you recorded with it, would sound almost identical, if not the same, as a custom telly if you ran it through a proper professional studio setup, did all your mixing and chucked it in like a production. People will very much disagree with that, but I promise you that half of the wizardry that happens in the production world normalizes all the kind of bits and bobs, and it's just a sad but true fact. Different story though when you are a live gigging professional, where the not as good electronics are a bit noisier. In some instances, with like the relic guitars, actually the more expensive guitars are even worse to play live because of the hum and all sorts of other stuff. But to come back to the piano world, same type of thing. And I think a piano sound is a piano sound. There's a million and one of them, from like Elton John's like really heavily compressed, really spangly high piano versus your really soft, like intimate ballady pianos. People aren't bothered about the fact that it's recorded at 192 kilohertz and it's, this absolutely gorgeous sample. Because quite frankly, by the time it's in a mix with, 6 other musicians or whatever on a stage, a lot of that clarity and detail gets lost. And I think what then matters is how quickly and how easy it is to then tweak the sound and, hone it to what you want to do. That's where Nord obviously is renowned for. You only need to watch like Glastonbury or any of the big music shows, and you'll always see a Nord. Always, for that reason. So let's point back down. Is this thing then, as a stage piano, what does that mean versus a workstation, and can they compete? People say it's not a fair comparison, but I would argue if you're going to spend £3-something thousand, you are naturally going to look at the two. And I think, to be honest, they are both more than capable of doing whatever you want them to. The difference with workstations feature sequencers normally, so you can kind of do actual production within them. There's a lot more sampling engine capability. So just one quick patch shootout. So I've got 2 orchestral patches. Here's my Nord stage one. That's using some samples that I've got, as well as my the Grand Imperial piano. Same type of thing here, but it's not really a fair comparison. Straight away, there is a difference. But the question to ask yourself is the difference between the two enough to sway you to one or the other? You might already be going, okay, for me personally, the Kronos sounds much nicer, but I've had to spend hours importing. So let me just go back up to up here. I've had to spend hours crafting that sound so that I could then play it. With a lot of the other stage pianos and indeed some of the other workstations, it's not necessarily as complex a job. Kronos is notoriously complex. It's probably, I would argue, I'm not even going to say it probably, I'm going to just say it. I think the Kronos is the best workstation if you're wanting complexity, sound, like acoustic fidelity and such. I think when you start comparing all these things, it gets really, really messy. And fundamentally though, if you're playing one of those on stage, by the time you've mixed it and played it within an orchestra and such, do I have hours to spend fine-tuning that sound on stage? And the answer is almost certainly going to be a no. So it's really interesting little comparison. But again, the stage piano in this instance, feature-wise, a lot less. But you cannot deny the immediacy of me being able to change the sound. I can't demonstrate it very well because of my camera angles and the room and such. Some of the stuff with workstations, you know, a lot of them have multiple engines in. So does the Nord of the stage piano. So you've got piano engine, organ engine, synth engine, sample engine. You know, a lot of the times though with the workstations and kind of your Ranger keyboards as well, the sounds tend to be more diverse. You can do a lot more with them. So you can route like patches and signal pathways and all sorts of stuff, whereas the whole point of it being in a stage piano is you press a button, you've got your strings. One's better for one scenario and one's better for another one, stage versus studio. Yeah. So yeah, sequencing, full production kind of capability on a workstation. So if I did actually want to sit and genuinely write music, not just write, but produce and compose everything end to end, you can do that with a workstation. Can't do it with a keyboard, but let's be honest, if you're saying you can't write music with any instrument, then there's a problem that, you know, it's not fixable by either or keyboard. The other huge one is the size and the weight. Normally, I say this knowing that there is smaller versions of your big workstations. So, for example, if I did ever get a Roland Fantom, I would absolutely be getting the 6 series because I think it's a lovely little size, it's great action. But to compare the Stage 388 and the Kronos 388, they're both almost similar weight. Kronos is 3 kilograms heavier, which isn't that big of a deal for me, but it's arguably far bigger and more weighty to try and kind of maneuver. So that's always something that comes first, because of course you've got to have more chips, more processors, more everything. What about stage pianos then? So performance, everything is performance. Oh, I need to tweak something. Click a knob or change a fader, encoder, whatever it is, done. Job's a good one. No menu diving, ideally. And you've got a super fast patch switching, all that type of stuff. Again, just to demonstrate this really quickly though, people talk about patch changing very quickly. You know, most modern workstations and keyboards, so just, again, you'll have to forgive how clunky this might look because my setup's not super ideal, but just unmute that for a sec. You know, so I've got... I've got a lovely piano, and if I want to just quickly change to an E piano, I can just press a button. Oh well, let's say an upright piano. Yeah, or change it to electric. Literally one button, yeah. I can also do that on the Kronos, so I'll do B-roll of this so you can see it. But I mean, I was in big orchestral patch there, so let's just swap that over. Big orchestral patch. Oops, which was this one. Of course, I can get the exact same type of thing there. When I quickly switch into an electric piano. Of course I can do that. One takes a little bit more effort than the other. But it's all these little tiny details when you're in like a live environment or in a studio environment or whatever, where you start getting like, oh, I hate this, hate it, or you love it, you know. I think one of the big things with like the Nautilus, for example, it's got a dedicated compressor section, which, you know, you are in a big live situation, just being able to quickly whack the compressor on and tweak it up and down, fantastic. If I want to do that on the Kronos, well, to be honest, I could do it, but I'm going to have to do, instead of 2 actions, which is going over to the button, hit, tweak, I would have to open a patch, go into a setting, probably 3 or 4 different actions, and do all sorts of other stuff. I could mitigate that entirely, knowing that, okay, I'm going to go do a gig, so let's do a little bit of programming on my Kronos so that actually, when I do get there, I program one of my my knobs so that actually I can just bring in a bit of compression. I would actually argue that that is better than the Nautilus, but there's a lot more of a kind of technical requirements before you do that. So, yeah, that is that. Let's go back very quickly onto topic. The architecture of a stage piano and the marketing kind of thing is where it completely hijacks everything. Because actually, if you looked at the two, they're both pianos. Well, sorry, try that again. They're both keyboards that can play pianos and various different sounds. And to be honest, whether you disagree or agree on the whole level of like the difference between the samples and such, they both do the same job, but have different tools within them that, if quite frankly you're not going to use, well, you may as well just be using a stage keyboard. But then if you then do have a stage keyboard, or stage piano rather, and you find yourself wanting to get a sequencer going, well, it's only at the point where you then go, oh, I wish I had a sequencer, that you then start looking at one and the other. So yeah, I think if you're going to look at the two, well, should you look at the two? Genuine question. My honest opinion and answer is you should never overlook one or the other. Because I think if you're going to spend silly money on a keyboard, arguably you need to, but it's just how I call it silly money because I know times are tough, but you have to compare everything. You know, like so I talk a lot about the Kronos because I've got one, but quite frankly, I think the Nautilus is actually slightly better than the Kronos in a lot of ways. If you are just that kind of, and I don't mean this to be remotely disrespectful, but if you're not super technologically literate and you just want to turn the thing on and play it, I think the Nautilus is an absolute fantastic machine. Because not only is the build quality of it like amazing, the sound capabilities are absolutely phenomenal. It is the same price as most mid to kind of upper stage pianos, and yet it will do so much more. But that's just another kind of little thing I noticed when I was doing some research for this video. So, what should you value? So I think to put value into a thing that you can measure, features, piano action, you know, like what is it you are wanting? Is it that accessibility? Are you technical? Are you going to get the most out of something like a Roland Fantom where, yes, it's got these fantastic analog synth engine modelings in it, but it requires lots of menu diving. If you're not a menu diving person, it's got no value to you. I'm sorry, but you'll sell yourself this dream initially, and you'll either spend the time learning it and getting stuck into the manuals, very much like I've had to do with the Kronos, which has been a slog, I'll be completely honest, or you'll just go, stuff this, I'm going to just go and get a montage or a, something else. Workflow, does it even have a workflow? So when I say workflow, when you're actually using it in your pressured environment, whether that's in the studio or you're just using it at home to try and inspire yourself, or you're on a gig, in a gig, on stage or whatever, your workflow is you in the moment doing what you need to do. If you can't quickly get yourself over to the EQ to tweak it because your sound engineer is kicking off, or you need a bit more poke or whatever it is, if you can't do that when you need to, that's a problem. And I think that's where the stage pianos always win, because they are designed to be able to just flick. Yes, the marketing of these companies is crap because it makes it really confusing, but I would argue that is the one thing that you should always look for in a stage piano, is that. But as I've said and hinted at with most of the workstations, they've got much more control over the sound, generally speaking. But you just need to kind of know how to get into the menu. Can you do it quick enough in a live situation? I would argue with practice, anything can be overcome. But yeah. So the workflow side, is it inspiring to play? This is my whole thing. When I got the Nord Stage 3, every single sound I made on it just inspired me to write something. I've played other instruments, which I shan't name, where quite frankly I was like, it just didn't inspire me. Maybe the samples were fantastic, but then the action and the way you interacted with the sounds that were kind of hidden within just made it so it wasn't inspiring and such, Longevity is a big one as well. So you're going to spend £3,000 on an instrument, you absolutely want to make sure it does the job and it does it for as long as physically possible. So, yeah. And then with that comes things like resale value and other things. The market's completely annihilated all over the place. I got a Korg Workstation SE there, which is a £1,400 fantastic synth, which I've got a video coming on soon. And yeah, I paid it was well under half price, and it's like new, because stuff just doesn't sell. But what I would say with the whole resale value and being a consumer, buying a product, secondhand, do not overlook buying instruments secondhand. Everything I've bought, with the exception of the Kronos, has been secondhand, and I've never had any issues. The difference is, though, I've spent an insane amount of time researching and trying to understand what the value is. The reason I ended up buying the Kronos new, excuse me, is slightly different, because I got it. I do this little calculation where I say, here's what the RRP is. If you took your taxes and things like that off, that's the actual value of the instrument, right? So if Kronos is going for like £3,200, then I'm going, okay, so realistically, the actual cost of this instrument is more £2,700, something like that, realistically. So I'm like, if we can get one at that price, fantastic. And I did. I fought long and hard to get some absolutely mega discounts. Huge shout out to AC Hamilton for sorting that out for me and for delivering it and everything else. But that is a one time where I actually broke my own rules there. Resale value then, to loop back. Yeah, if you're going to buy an instrument second hand, this is where actually the more lucrative, the more top end brands can get a bit stuffed, really. Because Korg, for example, you can buy second hand Korg gear for a fraction of what it is brand new. Does that mean Korg gear is bad? Absolutely not. To be honest, I've freshly got into the Korg world and everything I'm touching is like absolutely magic. But I would also be really silly if I said, like, why would I go and spend, say, £1,400 on a brand new Korg Workstation SE, which you can't really get anymore, when I can just go and get a second hand one at half the price? and then I can use the money I've saved to buy, whatever else it is. And I think with Nords really suffer in that regard, because I think mine, when I bought it, the price of one brand new was just shy of £4,000. And it was a kind of year 5 of its release cycle, which is insane. But then to buy the one I bought was still well in the £3,000 range. Managed to wangle it down. But actually what it means is you might then overlook the perfect tool for the job just because you've got your heart set on this one particular thing. Example of that is I went and looked at a Yamaha YC 88, second-hand one. And at the time, it was a direct competitor to the Nord Stage 3, and it was not even half the price. But here we are. So, yeah. Some other interesting ideas, and oops, just mindful of time. 2 final thoughts on it before I kind of start wrapping up, really, is complexity versus the immediacy. So, if you're wanting that incredible sound design capability, well, stage pianos, they can do it, but 9 times out of 10 a Workstation's far deeper. It rewards it, whereas the stage pianos reward its immediacy and being able to do things very quickly. Neither is better or worse than the other, but it comes with its own sets of pluses and minuses. One is a more immediate but less deep engine, so versus the other one, which is much deeper, but it's not as immediate and has more often than not, rather, a learning curve to it. There is a bit of an identity associated with instruments as well. Some final thoughts. If you're a live musician and you're not the most technically savvy person, and I mean that with the greatest of respect, but when I say technically savvy, are you going to menu dive when you're playing a gig in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people, when you need to find something? The answer is most likely no, but there are people, Jordan Rudez, there's loads and loads of people that swear by Workstations. Sound design, again, so if you're sound designing, I think Workstations obviously have the edge. Plug and play capability, I think you have to hand it to stage pianos because they are literally made to be plug and play. But I would argue that Workstation keyboards can be far more inspiring depending on the type of person you are, and what your music is and everything else. And the final thing, really, I think stage keyboards tend to hold the value a little bit better than the Workstation keyboards, and I think that is only because of the technology that's required. The tech that goes into stage keyboards isn't super complex compared to Workstations, whereas a Workstation, a Workstation is basically a computer in a stage keyboard, and as we have seen with all things technological and such at the moment, you can't afford to buy top-end computer tech in a piano, because quite frankly, that happened with the Oasis, and that thing cost tens of thousands of pounds. And yeah, they depreciate like mad because, 2 gig of RAM's worthless these days, but back in the day, it was worth quite a lot. You're far more likely to lose money on a Workstation in terms of like resale value as a result of that, because there's jokes about the Kronoses and Fantoms and Montages. They've been going for many years, and all they've done is really changed a couple of tech parts, and yet I could go and get a Kronos 2 now for £1,400 less than a Kronos 3. And fundamentally, they're almost the same instrument, just slightly better tech specs. With the stage keyboards, you don't tend to see anywhere near as much of a depreciation in that regard. Not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but it's just something I've observed. I'll kind of interlace some footage as I'm wittering on about that, but I've seen a Fantom 8 EX, which is Roland's top-end Workstation keyboard at the moment, for £2,400 the other day, which I thought was absolutely diabolical. But they're hard to put in your studio. They're these big, massive, clunky things. So anyway, yeah, lots of kind of faffing about. But I think Workstations, stage pianos, whilst you can kind of get stuck into the marketing of it all, you've got to strip all that back and look at actually stage pianos favour immediacy in a live environment, whereas workstations are an entire production universe in a keyboard. And if you're looking at something for gigging, please don't overlook a workstation keyboard, especially like your mid-tier ones like the MODX 8, the Yamaha one. It's phenomenal. I've heard nothing but good things about that. The Nautilus, your FA series from from Roland. It's quite frankly, if you're more technically minded, you might actually find that you get far more out of those things in a live environment than you do a stage piano. Likewise, just because these workstation keyboards can do absolutely everything, there's a reason why many super famous producers still have the trusty little stage pianos for when they're writing and composing and stuff, because you turn it on, hit play, you start playing something and you're composing without having to do any of the stuff. So just be smart with your money. Don't be too snobby with, I really want this thing. Look around. All of these things that I have bought are really calculated decisions, because to be honest, I'm not super wealthy. I'm very lucky with what I have. There's a process, and it involves lots of research and watching videos and reviews, and actually not getting sucked into, well, the Nord stage is better than the Korg Grand Stage piano. Well, of course it is. It's 2 times the price. But actually, could I get away with these mid-tier keyboards in a live environment? Well, of course you can. But I tell you, when people are gigging, they want to look the part. They want to look professional. Like if I'm going to go and perform now, of course I'm going to bring everything, even though I might not use it, because I want to look like I know what I'm doing. So that's something as well that I think is really, really, really understated. There will be people that can turn the crappy little MIDI keyboards, I say crappy, I don't mean to say it like this, but your Roland Go pianos and all this stuff, who can play those things like absolute monsters and make them sound amazing. And then you put an idiot like me on an Nord Stage 3 or something, and actually they will blow me out the water, and I think that's something as well. So without further ado, I've waffled long enough. I'll interlace lots of B footage and stuff there. But I will do a separate video which looks at doing sound comparisons between the two, because I think this was going to be a little bit like waffly regardless of what I did. And if I interlace all sorts of sounds and stuff in there as well, it's going to be an even more big video. But any questions, anything you want to know, please reach out in the comments. I'm looking at getting Discord set up soon, so that people can kind of chat about all things music, keyboards and guitars and whatever it is. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and have a lovely rest of your day wherever you are.